It's not uncommon to meet people who make poor choices under the guise that they want to live their life with no regrets. In today's video, we're going to be looking at the 10 biggest regrets that we see when it comes to retirement planning. So let's go ahead and get into this. The first one, the no regret philosophy. This is really rooted in Nietzsche's concept of love of fate, meaning the philosophy promotes the accepting life as it is, embracing both the good and the bad. Now, when you make good decisions, when you make poor decisions, you really have to analyze what is working well, what can you improve on. This, of course, when it comes to debt, when it comes to financing, when it comes to living your best life, however you might YOLO into it, it makes a really big difference because it can have a lasting impact when it comes to retirement, when it comes to retirement planning, and overall the well-being when you get to those golden years and living the retirement that you want. Now, this also focuses on making sure you know what it's going to look like, what you need. Are you entering into retirement having a lot of debt? Are you having a lot more savings and investing? What does it look like when it comes to having no regrets based in the philosophy that you have? Now, the second one is the retirement regrets. This is the biggest one. Studies reveal that many retirees express regret, particularly about financial planning and income streams. When we start looking at income streams during retirement, Social Security is roughly meant to replace 40% of your retirement income, meaning if you want to stay at that full 100%, let's say, for instance, you're making $100,000 a year, Social Security is going to give you $40,000 or even less than $40,000, meaning you have to make up the difference in different income streams, which means it could come from benefits, it could come from a 401k plan, it could also come from having those high yield ETFs that we're seeing like the HG or the VYM that is producing income that can supplement Social Security. Now, third one we look at, and one of the biggest regrets, the lack of financial preparation. Over 50% of Americans have said they have not adequately saved enough or really planned for retirement at all. Instead, they were focused solely on the present. When we think about the present, we see lifestyle creep, we see keeping up with the Joneses. We see individuals that instead of buying a $30,000 car, they buy a $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 car. So really the justification of knowing what is solely in the present, where you're spending your money, is one of the big reasons why I focus when it comes to financial preparation and when it comes to budgeting in general. If you do not know where your money is going, and for a majority of individuals out there, they have no idea where their money is going at all, you have three buckets, and I've always really focused on this. The first one is the income. The second one is the liabilities. The third one is whatever you have left over to do what you need. That could be debt repayment. That could be investing. That could be retirement. That could be saving for a child's future. So many things you could do with financial preparation, which is the reason, again, I focus on the budgeting. Now, the fourth one that we get into, the savings shortfall. In a study, 57% of participants regret not saving more for retirement. We have heard this for pretty much forever, as long as I know, and as long as I have heard these numbers. Not saving enough for retirement or not saving early enough really negates the ability to have the compounding interest and building those nest eggs to the point that they want. That is the reason when we start looking at the average 401k plan, and they're about $200K, which should last about 5 to 7 years during retirement, depending on, what you're spending, what your debt load is, everything of that nature. And this also talks about financial education gaps in the US. There is very minimal to no education when it comes to finances. Imagine for a moment if you thought of, let's say, high schoolers, 11th and 12th grade, had a very well-based financial education. Chances are they wouldn't make poor decisions when they start getting into young adults, into adults. For a majority of people, they start thinking about retirement and focusing on retirement between the ages of 35 to 45. So if you start working at 18, 20, 22, when you get set, you still have 10 to 12 years before you even considering putting money into retirement plans, including IRAs and 401ks. So you have lost a decade of compounding interest and a decade of contributions that you can have in there when it comes to the retirement or when it comes to the savings plan in general. Now, the fifth one, specific financial regret. This is very interesting and very specific to individuals that are already looking or in retirement. 23% of individuals regret not delaying Social Security to have a future higher income. When you start getting into retirement, when you think of that Social Security income, you have to go into retirement without debt. If you go in there with car payments, if you go in there with full mortgages for another 10, 15, 20 years, if you're going into retirement with a ton of credit card debt, chances are Social Security is not going to be enough to prolong or really cover all the expenses when you do get into retirement. 35% wish they worked longer to save more money and delaying Social Security benefits. So kind of a combination there, making sure that you're pumping up those 401k plans, those IRA plans, especially because you can put a lot more into them as you're entering and as you're getting to those retirement years. And 33% regret not purchasing annuities for guaranteed lifetime income. Now, this one to me is very interesting. When you think of individuals getting a lump sum, so let's say you saved for the last 20 years, you have, $500,000 in that 401k plan. When you cash it out, you get the money in an IRA or you transfer it out of that 401k plan. All of a sudden, you have more money in a large account than you have ever had in your entire life. For a lot of individuals, that is too much. That means they're going to they're going to buy that new car, they're going to eliminate some debt, they're going to burn through a lot of the money that they're getting out of those 401k plans versus having something like a guaranteed life income or an annuity that is going to give them a monthly check, which can supplement exactly what they were earning or where they were earning during those working years. Thinking back, Social Security is 40% of the income. They say you roughly need 80% of your current income to keep the same lifestyle. So where's that other 40+% coming to? This is the place where, again, if you're getting a lump sum of money, you have to make sure you're putting it to work, not only investing it, but making sure you have the income to cover the expenses. Now, number 6, the income versus savings. This is another place where it really does take some financial savvy ability and thinking bigger picture. So retirees worry about the stability of their savings, leading and really the need for guaranteed recurring streams of income. This is where YouTube comes in for me. And if you like the content that I put out, definitely consider subscribing to the channel. But this is where we look at annuities. This is when we look at Social Security. This is when we look at those ETFs. So thinking for a moment, if you're investing in an ETF that offers not only a little bit of growth potential, but also a little bit of income, when you get to the balance of having a larger balance in there, back to the Dave Ramsey old school golden goose, where he says, when you have an investment portfolio, you can take the dividends, you can take some of the growth, but never touch the initial principal. So if I have a portfolio and I have $1 million in that portfolio, if it's paying, let's say 10%, which is average of the S&P 500, I could take $100,000 out on average every single year, meaning we could get to the point of never touching the original, essentially the principal that we had in there of that $1 million portfolio. There's going to be up and down years, but ultimately, that is the theory behind having income versus savings. Now, one of the flaws in retirement, and it gets into number 7, the strategy of building or saving a pile of money and dismantling this pile due to financial insecurity or regrets or having the ability. So if you're putting all of your money into a giant pile, let's say you amass that $500,000 pile, dismantling it during retirement. So you're going to start borrowing a lot faster. This is why we talk about the 4% rule, the 6% rule, making sure that your money will last you through retirement. There's been a lot of articles as it sits right now when it comes to investing and staying invested in the market during your retirement years or moving the money to something that is a lot safer like bonds and CDs. They do not have the growth factor. So you really have to keep this in mind. If a lot of retirees kept their money invested in the S&P 500 in some of the growth through the retirement years, because you think if you retire at 65, let's say you live to 85, 95, 20, 30 years, if you're putting it into something that is very safe, that is kind of guaranteed like bonds and also looking at CDs, chances are it's not growing faster than you're taking it out. If you have it in an account that is, let's say bonds getting 2% return, inflation's at 2.8, and it was already up to 8% a couple years ago, you are losing money every single year in addition to the amount that you're taking out of that portfolio makes a huge, huge difference. Now, number 8, we get into the income method. This is a proposed solution is creating a diversified portfolio that generates regular income through investments instead of relying on the savings. This again goes back to the fundamentals of having multiple income sources. If you're sitting and let's say you have your regular 9-to-5 job, that's great. You start collecting Social Security. Okay, you have a second method. Then you have some investments that are giving you, the high yield savings accounts, which are giving you some earned interest in there. Then you have an investment portfolio that's giving you dividends. you're getting money now from 4 different sources in its entirety, meaning it's easier to supplement that for 40% of Social Security because of the income you're generating from a multitude of sources, making it very easy to manage when it comes to the actual monthly income that you're getting. Now, majority of retirees that I do financial education and counseling for have issues with cash flow, even though they have, a very high net worth, because of course, houses at some points might be completely paid off. They have a lot of issues. And what I see regularly is the cash flow, where if you have a retiree that's making, let's say, $2,400 a month, which is Social Security, that's it. That's all you get when that $2,400 is spent. And when you start throwing in car payments, all the utility bills, the internet bill, the phone bill, everything else in its entirety, a lot of times that $2,400 doesn't cover it. Again, even though these individuals have high net worth, because of the mortgages. Mortgages, I feel like, are really a big flaw. That's why when I do net worth calculators, I do not include the mortgage at all, because I feel like it really skews the numbers when you start putting in the super high home values that we're seeing right now, making sure, again, that you are excluding that to see exactly where you are. Now, number 9, the reinvestment strategy for pre-retirees. Reinvest 100% of dividends into income streams or into dividends when you're getting paid dividends, going back into those portfolios. For retirees, invest at least 25% of the dividends to offset the rising costs and increased income over time. So think about this. If you're getting to the point, and this is something that we've kind of touched on a couple times, so if you have a growth-centered ETF portfolio, let's say you're invested in the QQQM, the VOO, like I am, with the majority of my portfolio, keeping that and building that reinvestment strategy, putting all the dividends, all of the growth, everything in there, getting to the point where we move into retirement and turning some of that into some of that high income, the HD, the VYM, some of those dividend ETFs that are going to produce some dividends. Even if I'm only taking 75% of the dividends, 25% is still going to be growing in there with the dividends that are left, as well as the growth factor with the market itself. It can really be a win-win for retirees, because now you're supplementing, again, some of that Social Security with the income that's coming in. And the final one for this is benefits of income-based investing. Focusing on the reoccurring income through diverse portfolios, you can really avoid eroding the nest egg at all. Like we had talked about before with the logic of Dave Ramsey, combating the economic uncertainty, what we're seeing with tariffs, and creating potential generational wealth. This is something that I focused on in a lot of the content, is making sure that we have the generational wealth, that we're setting it up for success. That way, future generations can have their school paid for, have their mortgages paid for, have everything paid for in its entirety, without having to rely on being behind the 8 ball because they start life with so much debt. And honestly, when you're 18, you're going to college, racking up, $50, $70, $100,000 in student loan debt. Then when you actually get a job, taking the next decade to pay that off can be very, very time consuming. So, all right, guys, so that is going to do it for today's video. Definitely wanted to share the information with you, but let me know in the comments what you guys think. And as always, thank you guys for watching.